So we tried to use AI to build our app, and it kind of worked, until it didn't. If you're new here, my name's Muso, and I run a product studio called Fabrika, where we turn ideas into product. This time around, we had our own idea, and we wanted to see how far we can get with just using AI. So here's that story. Before we get into that, I think it's important to define vibe coding. You might not have heard of this term, but it's a term that's popular on the internet, and it basically means using a tool to vibe your code. This idea of vibe coding, or using tools to help build product, isn't new. So before AI, there were no code tools that would allow you to build products using flowcharts and connecting different blocks together to create products that functionally work. Vibe coding is a step up from that, so it leverages AI and all the magic of AI to create code like a developer would. So vibe coding has been really picking up steam over the last couple of years, and a lot of people have tried, some successfully, some not successfully, to build their own products using these vibe coding methodologies and tools, and we'll get into a bit of how we leverage that in this particular example. So, the story. A couple of months ago, I had the genius idea of creating my own travel app. It came from the annoyance that I faced when I was looking for flights using my credit card points. So I'm a big points hacker. I've racked up a ton of points through, unfortunately, spending a lot of money, and I wanted to use these points to go on a nice vacation. One obstacle that I kept running into is the points redemption didn't make a lot of sense. So I would check the American Express portal, the Chase portal, all the airline portals, and I saw such a big gap between the price of points between these different websites, as well as a gap between the type of redemptions that I could redeem for. So for example, with American Express, I could redeem 9,000 points for some headphones, and I can also redeem the same 900 points for a flight to Europe. To me, the math wasn't making a lot of sense, and I went on Reddit, started looking into it, and a lot of people face the same problem. So with that, I found a problem that I could solve, and I used that early validation, and I wanted to develop a product that actually solves that problem. I followed the same advice that I give to entrepreneurs that are uncertain or unclear about what problem statement they have, which is to look for potential direction or directionally accurate information in the marketplace so that they can make the best decision when they're going about building their product. So I did that. I found my early validation, and I wanted to have something to test if my hypothesis or my theory was correct. So I went into looking for a way to build this product, and that's how I landed on vibe coding. So over the course of 3 months, I tried a number of tools. So step by step, this is the process that I took. First, I put all of my problem statements and my thoughts and the different issues that I wanted to solve into a product's requirement doc, and I put that product's requirement doc into Gemini using Gemini 2.5 Pro to do some research. And I used Gemini 2.5 Pro because at the time the model had just came out and it was showing a lot of promise for academic level researching is what the pitch was. So I was interested. I wanted to try it, put all my information in there, back and forth with Gemini for really 4 or 5 hours to really hone in on what my product requirement docs was. And the result of that was a pretty fleshed out idea of how I'm going to implement the product, the technical stack that I need, as well as an implementation plan that was tailored to vibe coding. So that was step one. With step one completed, I was ready to move on to step two, which was to build the product. Step two is when it started to get a bit complicated. There aren't a lot of great vibe coding tools, or a couple of months ago, there weren't a lot of great vibe coding tools for mobile apps. Your options are really to use something called Rocket to build a React Native app, which is a framework that is best suited for cross-platform, so Android and iOS. However, tried it, wasn't the biggest fan of that, so I tried Bolt, I tried Lovable. Across the board, the different tools that I've used were not solving my problem. So here's an in-depth breakdown of the different tools that I tried. Initially, I tried Rocket. The interface was great. It was easy for me to get my PRD in and to get an output in. So from a usability or ease of use perspective, Rocket was great. However, the output of that was lacking. So I pivoted from there to Bolt. Same prompt, I put in my PRD that I got from Gemini into Bolt. It generated a version of an application, but I found Bolt really great at building an initial version of the app that I can play around with, that I can load on my phone using Expo. However, when it came to making specific edits, like changing the size of the component or layout of a component or a page, I found Bolt to be very limited. I couldn't select specific elements on the app, for example, and customize it. I had to create prompts that were very detailed and very long, and oftentimes when I did that, Bolt would change other parts of the app, and I wasn't a fan of that. From Bolt, I gave Lovable a try, and it was a similar situation. It was easy to get an initial version of the app, or a V0, done fairly easily. It was great for that. However, the continual editing, the refining was the challenge. So I took that feedback and I pivoted to IDE-based vibe coding tools, or vibe coding tools that were IDEs. So really, that came down to Cursor and Kuro. Cursor is a fantastic tool built for developers to help developers ship product faster. For vibe coders though, it is maybe a bit underpowered. It doesn't really allow you to create products without having deep code knowledge. It's very difficult to one-shot a product with Cursor, even if you have the PRD files, because you as a non-technical person are unable to benefit from Cursor, which allows you to have your coding editor plus AI. So at the time, this was a version of Cursor that didn't have the agent mode, so I found it extremely difficult to navigate errors. However, I did get very far with Cursor. So the benefits of using Cursor was I was able to do those micro adjustments that I couldn't do on Bolt or Lovable. I was really able to look into the code using ChatGPT, troubleshoot some of the errors, and I was able to continue to improve the app little by little. So after facing those issues with Cursor, I wanted to find another alternative that might give me a bit more flexibility and make it a bit more easier for me to develop the product. So I went back to the marketplace to look, and that's when I stumbled on Kuro. Kuro at the time was a newly released product. It was an Amazon product, so I was curious to see what that difference would be, and I was really surprised. Kuro has a very intuitive user experience. It allows you to vibe code in 3 different stages, one being the initial planning stage, a second being the design stage, and a third being the implementation stage. I thought that separation was very interesting, so I could chat back and forth with the AI to kind of figure out my idea in the best possible way, and then the design stage where we design the implementation of the product, and then implementation where I can supervise Kuro as it's doing its job and jump in and solve problems or answer any questions that it had. Kuro was a fantastic tool, and I was able to go further with Kuro than I was with Cursor. However, I still reached the bottleneck, which was me. As a non-technical person, that kept being the biggest issue because I was confronted with situations that I didn't anticipate. Very easy examples, an API. So to get the airline data, it's actually not as simple as I thought. There aren't any API providers that give you all the information neatly packaged into one nice API, so it's very difficult for you to actually get that information. The API provider that I thought would work actually didn't work because the data quality in their API wasn't as good as I expected or as good as I wanted. So what ended up happening is these different AI tools, regardless of whether it was Kuro or Cursor, would hallucinate or imagine these different data pieces and would just insert the data and give that back as a response instead of actually producing live data. So I spent a lot of time trying to troubleshoot that, trying to find alternatives to solve that, and that really took up months of my time, and I wasn't able to progress much with the main pieces of the application that mattered, which was the front end, so the look and feel of the app, as well as the design of the app. You might be curious, where are we now with this app idea? Unfortunately, I wasn't able to develop it just using Cursor and these AI tools, and I called in reinforcements. So we've transitioned this to be a project that we take on as an agency, and we're super excited to be launching this product in the coming weeks. If you're interested in signing up and trying out the product, check out altovia.app, and you'll be the first to know when we launch this app. But the reason why we push this app into our product studio is so that the professionals can handle it. As fun as vibe coding is, going back to our fundamental belief, as of now in November of 2025, the vibe coding tools are not good enough to create production level tools. Yes, for the reasons that I mentioned, because it's very difficult and very challenging to get the apps to do the basic functions that you need it to do, but there's also a lot of bug fixing that has to take place for this app to even be nearly ready to solve some of these problems that I set out to solve at the beginning. We find a lot of founders are surprised by it. I think there's unrealistic expectation of what vibe coding tools can achieve or these different no-code tools can achieve, and there's also misrepresentation of how good these tools are. If you look into the broader market, there's a lot of folks that are talking about vibe coding an application from $0 to $1 million. That's an exaggeration, but still, but fundamentally we aren't seeing that level of efficiency or that level of success with vibe coding tools. I want this to be a very comprehensive video, so I would like to answer the question of when are vibe coding tools good? In my personal experience building this up, I found the vibe coding tool that I was using to be really great at helping me visualize and communicate the ideas that I've had. So as a founder, I think vibe coding tools are immensely valuable to help you communicate your thoughts and your ideas to investors, to employees, to people that you are in conversation with, and help get that message across the line. And I'd love to emphasize that, especially when you're fundraising or talking to potential customers for enterprise level solutions that might not be very clear or very easily understood. Additionally, if you're interested in increasing your technical knowledge, vibe coding tools or vibe coding your project is great. I learned a lot about how to actually develop product and how to communicate product because of this project. So there's an immense value of information in vibe coding and practicing implementing with these tools. So I hope you enjoyed that story. I'd love to tell you more stories. If you're interested, just drop us a follow and wait for our next video.